Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
two certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only two best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go. Welcome to the very first, maybe last, episode of Dear Krachel-Squared. We have another Rachel,
fun little who has a little guest appearance.
A little guest spot, not live. We had a pre-recorded guest spot for Dear Krachel. Once we get to our second question, you'll see that Kristen and I were not necessarily the most qualified to answer the question. And I have a former client and a good friend, also named Rachel, who had the necessary experience and credentials to answer the question. So I asked her to chime in, and she did. So
you'll hear that in the second question. It's a fun little surprise for you today.
Yeah. So, okay, we're just going to dive right in because we only have two questions today, but they're both very, meaty questions, weighty questions. And there were other questions we got over the past month that I did want to answer and that I'm hoping to save for our October episode, because I just don't like the idea of spreading ourselves too thin and not giving the best answer. I'd rather, quality over quantity.
We get some questions that have pretty simple and straightforward answers. That's not really what today is. So we don't want to skip over anything.
No. Okay. So the first one is very serious, and that's why I wanted to give it a lot of attention. So, Dear Krachel, we hear a lot of advice on what to do if we feel depressed, like go get help from a therapist or whatever. My question is about what the people around the depressed person can do. This has happened to a family member, a friend, and now a boyfriend who doesn't want to drag me through the mess. I say things like, go to a therapist and I'll drive you to appointments if you want, but I still feel helpless. There are important people in my life these are important people in my life, and I feel terrible standing on the sidelines, although I know I can't do much anyways, while these people go through depression. How much pressure for them to get up and do things is enough or too much? Should I just start ignoring the fact that they're sad all the time and wait for it to be over? But then again, I feel like I've been waiting years for one of my loved ones. I don't want to give up on my relationship yet just because he's going through something right now. We've hardly had a chance to see where this thing can go. It's been like 2 or 3 months. What resources are out there for a person like me? In this case, my boyfriend actually is open to the idea of me taking him to appointments. I really think he needs a new job. They work everyone there way over 40 hours a week, and he needs to work nights and weekends all the time. Seriously, someone has died at this job, just at their desk, from a heart attack, from stress. I don't think this job is healthy for him, and I think it's the root of why things are becoming what they are. Melissa.
Oh, Melissa, this is really hard. And I have a lot of empathy and compassion because it is so hard to see people you love struggling in that way, struggling in a long-term depressive way. Of course you want to help. You're just a good person who really cares about people clearly. And of course you want to come in and help as much as you can. And depression is not something that you can solve or fix for anyone else. They're being supportive is one thing, of course, but that's not something that you can offer up solutions for someone else. They have to be bought in to their own healing. You can't buy them in for it. So even if you say, hey, you should go to a therapist, even if they agree, they still have to be truly bought into that experience to get the most out of it. And I believe a different way of handling. First of all, you don't even mention this part, but I think it's really important is that when you have people in your life who are depressed or who are having a really hard time and you really want to help, you feel like your heart is really going out to them, you have to take extra good care of yourself.
Yeah, that's very important. You have to have really good boundaries and extra energy just to be around someone who's depressed, because their energy will kind of suck the life out of you sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, not intentionally.
No.
But it's hard to be around that without feeling affected by it, especially if you're an empathetic person who literally like feels other people's feelings.
And your instinct is going to be to do the opposite. Your instinct is going to be to do less for yourself.
To join them where they're at.
To help them more.
Which doesn't actually help anybody.
You're thinking, well, I'm feeling fine, so I don't need as much sleep, or I don't need to take care of myself as well, because in comparison to them, I'm doing really well. Yeah. And so I can sacrifice my own stuff to be there for them. But then you end up just having two completely burned out, drained people. And that's not going to help you or them.
No.
So that's step one, is you have to take extra good care of yourself in order to be able to support all of the people in your life who need that from you.
Right. You can't sacrifice things that bring you joy or think that you will be helping them if you commiserate or you join them on their level.
Or don't feel guilty for
not
enjoying
joining them
things
on their level
in your life.
Yeah.
Even though they're not capable of experiencing that with you right now.
Yeah, that's not going to help them in the long run. They might actually think they want you to commiserate, but as someone who's like been in like your boyfriend's shoes or whoever is in your life has been struggling, I think in the moment, I've certainly wanted like you to commiserate with me. And I don't think that would have helped. That would have probably just made it worse, even though in the moment I was pissed that you were like fine and I wasn't fine.
Sure.
To be honest.
Yeah. And it is hard to be the person who's feeling okay or feeling good even.
Yeah.
And you want that for the other person. You really do. And so I think Rachel will be able to back me up on this. My go-to has been the same as Melissa's, which is solutions. Well, what can we do? Or how can we make this better? How could you make a change? Or how could we improve this? And it's coming from this place of, I don't want to see you here anymore.
Yeah. And you want to know how that made me feel? Pissed off.
Yeah.
Which is maybe a little bit better than depressed, to be honest. Like on the scale of depression or the scale of just emotions, depression is very, very low. It's like the lowest on the scale.
Yes.
And then a little higher up is anger. Anger has more energy. So, you know what? If they get pissed off, that actually might be better for them than the complete lack of energy that depression will make you feel.
But you have to know these people. Because for some people, trying to offer up solutions like that will make them feel more exhausted and more defeated. So that's not necessarily helpful. Rachel, you told me something a while back that was actually really helpful for me knowing how to be supportive of you or other people when they're having those kinds of experiences, those kind of down, depressed moments. I don't know if you remember this.
No, you can tell me what I said.
But you said that, first of all, you said, please don't give me solutions. Please do not tell me what to do or what I should do.
Because I was trying to get to the fact that it pissed me off. That's where we went on that. Yeah.
Right. So because it's too exhausting and I can't imagine doing anything else.
It often makes you feel like you're not doing enough. And when you're in like a really depressive funk, being told you're not doing enough is one of the hardest things you can hear because you don't have any energy to do anything else.
And it also makes you feel like it's not okay to feel how you're feeling.
Yeah, that there's something wrong with you for feeling how you feel, which I don't think there is. You know, most people who are feeling like that, there is a reason.
Sure, of course.
Whether it's mental or situational or chemical or dietary or whatever, or childhood trauma, like there is a reason that someone is feeling the way that they are feeling.
Yes. And so you have said what's a lot more helpful is if you can say, hey, you're allowed to feel that way today.
Yeah.
It's okay to be down about that. It's okay to not have any energy today. You're not going to feel like this forever. I remember moments when you have felt much more positive about this very subject, or you felt much more energized or motivated or whatever, and you will again. But it's okay to feel that way today. Don't push it today. And so that's been a helpful way for me to know what to do because I want to be helpful, but I also have not always had the right tools. And so I jump to solutions just like Melissa's doing, and that's counterproductive.
It really is annoying. When you're on the receiving end, it can be annoying. Now, does that mean that you shouldn't offer any support to someone who's in that situation? No, because I will say that it is helpful to have a little extra support sometimes, especially for things that seem easy, but that just like easy things become hard when you're in that state. So like washing dishes can become such a drag, or, like picking up your clothes from the dry cleaner can become such a drag. So if you're someone who's feeling better and you want to find a productive way to help someone who's in that state, then it can be appropriate to offer support in like tasks that are just hard for them to get done.
Yeah.
You know, like walk their dog or, you know, make a meal for them or something like that. But I don't want to encourage that to the point where you become someone's maid or servant.
No.
You know, like,
because then we're going back to what we said before. You have to take really good care of yourself too.
Right.
It can't be all about the other person.
So you can inquire a little bit more about where you could support, or, hey, what if I did this? Or what if I picked this up for you? How would you feel about that? That can be a good way to help someone that's not directly like pestering them to go to therapy.
And there's another way of handling that too. Instead of saying, you should go to therapy or I'll drive you to therapy, what I imagine would be a more helpful way to hear that in a way that would encourage buy-in is, if you choose to do something like therapy, I would really support you. I would even be willing to drive you if that's something that you think would be helpful for you.
Mm-hmm.
So you make the choice. I'm not telling you what to do, but if you choose it, I'm 100% behind you. Or if you quit this job that is completely sucking the life out of you, I'm all for that. I'm here for you no matter what. Even if you quit that job and even if you don't know what you're going to do next. Instead of, you should quit that job that is draining the life out of you. Now someone's telling you what to do, which feels, again, kind of defeatist.
Mm-hmm. So I'll also say that sometimes, like, I really believe that people do have to get to a point sometimes where they hit a rock bottom and then they're willing to help themselves. I don't know how it works any other way most of the time. And I'm not saying in cases of, like, obviously, we're not talking about if someone is legitimately suicidal, then, like, you don't give them the option of deciding when they're ready for help. You know what I mean? Like,
that rock bottom can be too far down.
And obviously, Kristen and I are not trained therapists, and like that is obviously not our area of expertise. But there is very clearly a line where if you really think someone is like deeply depressed enough to harm themselves, then of course, you have permission to insert yourselves into that and to do what you need to do to get that person some help, or, you know, alert other people. And if they're mad at you about that, that's fine. They can be mad at you about that.
Yeah.
But with people who you're not fearing for, you're just really hurt to see them so deep in that funk, then I think that you have to often let them get to the point where they're ready to help themselves. And I definitely, and I think you know what? There are some people who you will be more who could maybe help them more. And honestly, sometimes you as a person really close to them are not actually the likeliest person. Sometimes someone who's a little bit less involved, a little bit less biased, might actually be more convincing to them than someone like you who they know is overly invested in them. So like at one point when I got a therapist, it wasn't because Kristen told me to. It was because one of my other friends, who I wasn't quite as close with at that time, was like, I think maybe you would benefit from that. And I wasn't triggered by what she said because she wasn't like all up in my business, you know?
Right. That degree of separation can be really helpful.
So I probably would have gotten there on my own, but she did suggest it and I did take her up on it at that time. And it did help. And it did, like, I kind of got myself out of that funk doing the work with a therapist. But it wasn't because you told me to go do that.
Right. In fact, if I had told you to, especially when you were down really in a funk, I don't think that would have been very helpful or productive for you.
Probably not. So, okay, there's that. And I have something that I want to say to you that is very likely going to trigger you. And I just want you to hear it. I want you to breathe through the discomfort of it. And I want you to I just want you to be open to acknowledging the uncomfortable truth of what potentially could be true about what we're saying. I'm not sure that it's healthy to enter into a relationship when someone is depressed. And before you tell me, no, like he's recently depressed, from what I'm reading in this email, you've only been with him for 2 or 3 months, which means his depression existed from the day you met him till now. I don't care if you think it started like 3 weeks after you started dating. He was primed to go there. This is not like you don't snap the fingers and end up depressed. It comes on gradually. It builds like a crescendo. So the level he was at when you met him was depressed. Whether or not you saw it like that, he was depressed. And I am not at all convinced that someone who is in that state, as someone who has been in that state many times, often for weeks or months at a time, I would have been the worst candidate for a relationship at that point. And I don't care. And here's the thing. When I'm depressed, it's usually not coming out of nowhere. It's usually not like chemical or something I can't explain. I have a reason for it. I can say it is a situation that is deeply getting me into a funk, just like him. Like, you believe it's situational because of his job, right? Every time I've been in that funk, it's also felt situational to me. And I still don't think that that is a good enough excuse for me to have tried to enter into a relationship at that point.
There's a big difference. And because you've had some other very close family members or friends in your life who have been depressed, you might have had this other experience. There's a very big difference between being in a committed friendship or relationship with someone and at some point they go through a depressive period or a really challenging time that has them low for a long time.
And you stand by them during that process.
And of course, you support them, and then they move through that, and then you're able to reestablish the friendship as it was. There's a big difference, though, in starting a relationship with someone who's in that place, because right off the bat, the dynamic is imbalanced.
You're
the fixer,
right?
And this person needs fixing.
Yeah, and the fundamental problem to me...
I don't believe they need fixing, by the way, but that's the dynamic that's happening right here.
Sure. And the fundamental problem for me is that a relationship is something that has to be established. It has to have a foundation that is rooted in health. And if someone is depressed from day one, they are not capable of building a new, deeply healthy relationship when they are in that state.
It's taking everything they have just to get through the day. Much less to be able to contribute their equal part of a new relationship, which does require energy and attention and fostering.
And deep self-awareness. Yes. And just, it requires mental health, which is not to say that if you are mentally unwell, you do not deserve to be in a relationship. Like, that is so not the thing. But again, there's a huge difference between if you already have a foundation with a person, then your relationship is rooted in something strong and you can work through your difficulties together versus picking up someone's baggage from day one when they have not yet earned, quite frankly, earned the right for you to pick up their baggage because you don't know them. Like, you don't have a deep, longstanding, healthy relationship with them, which would give you the right to pick up their baggage. And that they've earned that right from you, that privilege of you taking on their baggage. That's a big deal. It's a serious thing. And I'm thinking about AA. When people go into AA, not to completely compare depression and addiction, but they are both mental health issues. When you go into AA, I think one of the rules is that you are not allowed to enter into a new romantic relationship for a year or something like that. You have to have a year of sobriety under your belt before you're even allowed to contemplate that. And that is, again, for good reason, because it requires you to be alone and to learn how to care for yourself and to not use anyone else as a crutch or anyone else as a motivator to get out of your funk, that you have to want to do it because you want to do it. That even your children can't be the reason that you do it because the reason can't be anything outside of you.
Because then you're reliant on this other person to maintain your mental health.
Which is not healthy.
It's not healthy. It's codependent. And so we don't want that for you. And to be honest, and I know this is going to make you probably feel very sad and scared, but if you decide this is not the best way to start this relationship with this person, if this is your person, you will come back together when he is in a healthier state.
Yes, 100%.
And he will want to be able to support you just as much as you are supporting him in different ways. And he'll be able to do that at that time. So you don't have to say, if I'm leaving, that means I'm leaving forever. And it's also going to be really hard for you to potentially consider ending a relationship with someone who's already having a really hard time. But this is for the potential much greater health of this relationship or another in the future that can start on a healthier groundwork and set a really strong foundation.
Mm-hmm. I know
this isn't what you want to hear.
I really, really, really I'm wary of the precedent of getting into a relationship with someone when basically from day one, you're trying to help them or even fix their problems And how do you know that someone would have done it for themselves if you're there doing it for them the whole time?
How do they know if they would have done it for themselves?
They know. Exactly. It makes me uncomfortable. And the last thing that I'm going to say is that I think it's important for you and anyone else who resonates with this issue or feels like they've had experience in a dynamic like this to ask yourself, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of deep honesty with yourself. Why am I a match to this situation? Because like attracts like. So if what I have attracted is someone who at this moment is like in a state of deep depression, who I am feeling compelled from right off the bat to help and to sort of fix their problems or to help support them in any way I can, why is it that is on some level resonant with me? And I think for a lot of people, you'll find the answer could be a lot of things, but one that I think is pretty common is this dynamic reminds me of a relationship I had in the past, usually with someone really important, like my mom or my dad.
Or a sibling.
Someone, but very often you see people repeating a dynamic to try to get a different outcome than they got when they were younger. I
tried to support a parent or tried to support a younger sibling through a really hard time, and they weren't open to it. So
I was always trying
to pour into someone else.
I was always trying to get my mom's love and affection, but she was too depressed to really give that to me. Like, she was not emotionally available. And so I keep inadvertently attracting those dynamics so that I can get that same love and affection that I wasn't able to get when I was a kid. I'm not saying it is that exact dynamic, but I'm saying if you're a match right off the bat to a dynamic like that, I am concerned that it has roots historically that you deserve to look at so that you can be a match to the kind of healthy relationship that you really want, where off the bat, that person is emotionally available. Depressed people are emotionally unavailable. They are not emotionally available to you. I say this as someone who is completely emotionally unavailable to people when I'm in that state. I could not be emotionally available. Like, I just couldn't. It's all about you when you're depressed. And you don't want it to be, but it is. So they're not emotionally available. They're not even really like physically available to you because like they're in such a deep kind of funk that it pervades your whole body.
Yeah.
And sexually too. I mean, in every way, it's a shutdown. You don't deserve to be a match to someone who's in a state of shutdown.
And that's not saying anything bad about this guy at all.
No.
It just means
he's not ready at this moment, I don't believe.
He deserves to be able to get help and to know that he was able to do that for himself and then get into a healthy relationship.
Yes, and you deserve the same. You deserve engagement and emotional availability and health and someone who can stand on their own 2 feet and would never need to use you as a crutch. And I don't mean that means they would never need your support, but they don't need you as a crutch. There's a very different thing between support and crutch.
Yes.
You deserve that. And again, this is not the easiest message to give, but it was incredibly necessary because this is not the first time I've seen this dynamic. I don't want you to feel bad about it because I've seen this dynamic in a lot of people, in a lot of clients.
Oh, yeah.
And
I've been in this dynamic.
Yeah,
I know this dynamic.
Kristen's been the of this with guys that didn't deserve for her to come in and try to swoop in and fix all their problems at the beginning.
I know exactly how this feels.
Yes.
And I can tell you it doesn't end well.
No, it never does.
Because it doesn't start out in the healthiest, most solid manner.
You can't be a partner to someone if you're not in a healthy mindset. You're barely keeping
your head above water.
You can't start out being a partner to someone. Especially. You can hardly be a partner to someone you're already in an established relationship with at that point, if you're really in that deep.
Yeah.
You can't possibly start trying to be someone's partner. And that's what you guys both deserve. So let's look at the long term. And even though the short term is going to be really hard, the long term is what we need to focus on. Because what's best for you guys both in the long term is likely for you to be fixated on how do I become the healthiest version of myself so that I can be engaged with someone who's equally healthy.
Okay.
I'm giving you a hug. I know,
a virtual hug.
It's not fun to hear, but I'm not in the business of telling people what they want to hear.
We really, really want the best for you and for him and all involved, truly. And that's why we're being as honest as we are.
Okay, so we're going to move on to question 2. Let's read the question first, and then we'll kind of follow up with our second
Rachel.
Rachel.
Bring in our heavy hitter. Dear Krachel, I'm a side hustler and for sure a hummingbird type. Variety is one of my top values. I've clarified all of this with the help of YouTube, by the way, so thanks. Lately, I felt my relationship with my boyfriend of almost 3 years fading. mostly because I feel like I'm in such a different place than when we met. I have very different needs, and I no longer think our goals align. I know stuff like this happens, and that's just life. But I was struck by a thought today. Are these two things connected? Can someone who's so fueled by variety ever maintain a long-term relationship, even if I want it? Am I doomed to get bored or quickly grow apart from all of my partners? And more generally, I guess, how do you square the variety we see in passion profiles with other non-work-related social norms? Thank you for all you do. And that's from Olivia.
Okay, Olivia. So as neither side hustlers nor married people, or people who've been in like really, really long-term partnerships the way a marriage would constitute, when I read your question, the first person I thought of was my friend Rachel, who was a former client, and she is both a side hustler and in a happy long-term marriage with a non-side hustler. And I wanted her opinion. So I emailed her to ask what her take was. And she wrote me this really long, really awesome email. And I said, this is too long. I can't possibly read this, and I don't want to cut it. So can you read it? And she said, sure. She was really excited. So we're going to transition to Rachel, and then we'll be back to give our take in a few minutes.
I'm not going to lie and say that being in a long-term relationship as a side hustler / hummingbird is easy. Like any relationship, it takes a lot of work. I think success for me has come from the fact that I found someone who I can be totally honest with about everything, including my side hustler self, and discuss things with when I get bored. I can recall so many conversations where I've looked at Greg while we were at a restaurant, sitting near a couple who was obviously on a very early in their relationship date, and asked him, "Do you ever miss dating?" I would tell him that I miss dating because there was this novelty and mystery inherent in new relationships, and really most new things that change as a relationship matures. They don't disappear, they just change and become harder to uncover. I loved the challenge and the thrill of getting to know a new person. Though, if I'm completely honest, I really don't miss dating at all. I just miss the fantasy of it. Greg would look back at me, smile, and remind me that we were on our own adventure. And it's true. When you're in a long-term relationship with someone, it turns into its own different flavor of adventure. Sure, there are times that are a bit more devoid of variety than dating a new person, but it's really all about shifting your mindset. Instead of the relationship itself or the dating requiring variety, it's your person that you get to experience all the variety with. Of course, your partner has to also be into variety or it might not work. I also wanted to tackle the idea of variety as a value for a moment. For me, and for my husband, promise I clarified it with him before saying this, variety is not really a value in and of itself. Growth and expansion are the values that drive variety in our life. When I look back at the times I was truly bored, with a relationship, with a job, a hobby, etc., it was because I wasn't growing anymore. It was because I felt stagnant. Now, back to the piece on relationships. I recently read a quote from a John Gottman book called The 8 Dates that uncovered a different layer of commitment for me. He says, "True commitment is choosing each other over and over again, because ultimately what makes relationships work is the decision to make them work." He then goes on, "Let me tell you the story of Alice in Wonderland. Alice sees this very unusual rabbit go down a hole, and she jumps in with 2 feet. She has no idea what this journey is going to be, and Wonderland isn't really all that great a place. There are scary things, challenging things, and things that are also interesting and fascinating. It's an adventure, and Alice doesn't know what's in store for her, but she jumps in anyway. Alice doesn't hesitate or think maybe a better rabbit will come along tomorrow. She feels in her heart that she's embarking on a profound journey and that, despite the difficulties, it's still magical and amazing. Alice doesn't look back and doesn't question the adventure she's chosen. That's commitment." Gottman also has mentioned in other writings that it's important for values to be aligned in order for a relationship to work. The two individuals can see things differently or approach things from different angles, but the values must be the same. There's another quote I love from a book called Tuesdays with Morrie. It says, "If you don't have a common set of values in life, you're going to have a lot of trouble. Your values must be alike, and the biggest one of those values is your belief in the importance of your relationship. In essence, commitment must be a value for both people. I brought both of these points up because I noticed there was a piece of the question about needs and goals not aligning. And oftentimes, when you feel like there are some needs or goals that aren't aligned, there might also be a misalignment of values. Yes, stuff happens, people drift apart, and that's much less likely to happen if both people have firmly committed to and prioritized their relationship, side hustlers included. Instead of asking whether her relationship will just wear out over time, what would happen if she instead asks herself whether she's all in with this person and vice versa? And furthermore, does she want that sort of vulnerability in her life? If she does, and she knows it will not come from this relationship, then maybe it's run its course. Not because of her yearning for something new, but for her desire to be deeply known and understood. When I sent this question to my husband to get his take, he said something beautiful that I wanted to quote. I think that the biggest things her partner can do are to be engaged and supportive. Whether you love someone or not isn't a matter of matching hummingbirds and jackhammers. If she feels like she can be supported by him and that he understands her and will stand with her in any choices she wants to make, that shows the strength of their relationship and of his respect for her life choices. I will always 100% support you, no matter what you're doing or what you're going through. I'll work things through with you, I'll help you navigate things, and do whatever it takes. And furthermore, I want to understand those choices and be there in them with you. Therein lies the novelty in long-term relationships. Dating a new person can indeed be thrilling, but I firmly believe, as you said in your answer, that any thrill of the new is superseded by the thrill of depth and understanding. New wears off of everything, from things to relationships. But feeling like you were understood, supported, known, and then reciprocating it, that is one of the most powerful experiences of my life. And I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
Okay, thank you again to Rachel, and also to Greg.
I know, a little
who gave his
little
take.
silhouette from Greg.
So I really, really like her answer for a bunch of reasons, but I think she really hit the nail on the head when she was talking about how growth is really the key here. That if you have a partner who values growth and wants to grow with you as a person together and wants to keep figuring stuff out and is engaged, deeply engaged in the relationship, then I think you can kind of do anything. Even if your value system is a little bit different, obviously there has to be some shared overlapping value system. But I think that desire for the same kind of growth and personal development and wanting to grow as a person together is pretty much fundamental. And if you don't have that, I don't think any relationships really do well. Even if you don't break up, you tend to get a lot of stagnant people who feel like roommates if one of them isn't interested in growth or neither of them are.
Yep. I felt like Olivia's question was essentially getting to, can I be a side hustler who values and wants both variety and commitment? And what I really loved about Rachel's answer and Greg's answer was that they didn't make those seem opposite. They almost made it seem like they're this perfect synergy of we are both committed to each other and to our individual and our joint growth.
Yeah.
So we're committed to our growth. So you don't have to be committed and bored and committed and stagnant. That does not inherently have to coincide with that idea of long-term commitment.
Do not have to be the same thing at all.
You can be committed to exploring things. You can be committed to constantly having your own growth experiences and checking in as a couple and going on new trips and having novel experiences together. And that can work beautifully as long as you're both committed to those things.
Mm-hmm. So, does that mean that you should be in this relationship? I have no idea. And in fact, it would be normal. It doesn't matter if you're a side hustler or not. It would be normal for people to grow apart. People grow apart naturally and organically all the time. And if you suspect that you don't have enough values in common, those deeper values that are really important for people to share, and or you don't suspect that your current boyfriend is the type of person who is interested in that level of growth and kind of continual, renewal is the word I would use to describe that.
Yeah.
Renewal of a long-term healthy relationship, then probably not. This is probably not like the best long-term match for you, and that would be fine.
What we don't want is for you to feel like you need to stay in a relationship because you're afraid of your side hustler tendencies.
And that you're always going to want to like bail. And so I might as well commit to this person.
Exactly.
That's not what we want for you.
That's not what we're talking about. We're saying these are really good questions to ask yourself and to give yourself very honest answers to. And it's also normal to have doubts. Even if it is the right person, it's normal to have doubts sometimes. That just means you're checking in. That means you're asking questions. Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily mean every doubt means I got to run away. Mm-hmm. But if you're having consistent doubts about the same kinds of things over a long period of time, and you're sensing that a deep clash in values is becoming more and more apparent, then yeah, this probably isn't right. And that doesn't mean you're running away because you're a side hustler. That means you are recognizing that you have some things that, in order to be committed, are going to be really crucial for you to have in common. And variety might be one of those things. And growth might be one of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a good question could be, is this the person I want to do that work with? Because I really believe that you are going to be the type of person who is intrigued by what Rachel said about growth and exploration and like renewal and like having almost multiple iterations of the same relationship over the course of years. I'm guessing that's something that could be interesting to you. So the question isn't, do I want to do that? Because I think the answer is yes. The question is this the person I really want to do that with? And if the answer feels like no, then you can leave. It's not like you're bored and you just need to like get over it. It might just not be the right person for you to want to do those things with. And I think a good indicator for you is like, let me find the person who I'm excited to do that work with, you know, who I'm not maybe afraid I'm going to get bored of, because I can tell they're the kind of person who doesn't like to be bored either. And they're going to want to keep doing that work with me.
So while we obviously can't answer the question for you about whether this is the right relationship, although I hope we've given you some things to hopefully answer that question on your own, we can definitively say that a long-term committed relationship is not at odds with being a side hustler who values variety.
No.
Not at all.
Though she did ask, and I thought this was an interesting question, are there implications, like broader implications for, you know, your passion profile and how it shows up in areas that have nothing to do with your career or money? And I think sure, because, you know, if you're a fire starter, for example, and you value, you know, no limitations and freedom and independence, then you might bring some of that into your relationship. But that doesn't mean that like you're going to be so independent that you can't commit to anyone, or that you need a ton of space, or that you need an open relationship because you can't possibly commit to just one person or something like that. I think that your personal definition of like freedom, which is a big fire starter value, and independence matter a lot. And so you might experience freedom with another person in a way that doesn't look like freedom to another outside bystander. Do you know what I mean?
Your definition is what really matters.
Right. I mean, my definition of freedom has a lot to do with freedom of time and being able to make my own choices about when and how I do things. So in my ideal relationship, freedom isn't like, give me all the space from this person. Freedom is like, let's make time to do really like interesting things together. Or I hope that we value not being married to the 9 to 5 in the same way, or that you prioritize living a high quality life and not just kind of going through the motions the way that I do as a fire starter who's kind of thinking outside of the box. So again, it doesn't have to be literal. It can be more like there are different translations and unique ways that your values can show up in your relationship that are different than your career. But yes, there are parallels for sure.
I just have to say, for anyone who's really liking this conversation about how the values of passion profiles show up in relationships, we actually have a bonus video in our passion profile short course that is exactly about that. It is because we started to get so many questions from people when we first opened up the program, saying, well, how does this affect my relationship with my boss, with my husband, or with my mom?
How do we manage when I'm a fire starter and he's a thriver and it feels like we have nothing in common?
Exactly. So we actually made a separate video for that. So that's something, if you're interested, we get a lot more into in that course.
I'll link to the short course in the episode description.
Yeah.
Just in case. But I hope that gives you a lot of food for thought between us and Rachel Lowe. That was a lot of food for thought. I just want to shout out to Rachel and Greg. They are a husband and wife photography team, among other things, because again, Rachel's a side hustler. So she also has a full-time job, but she also has a photography business with her husband. And I'm going to link to their site if you're in Colorado and you want some really awesome photography. And what I love about them is that they are not your traditional, they do lots of photography. They tend to do like weddings and lifestyle and that kind of photography. But they are not your like classic, like everyone line up in a row and take a picture. I mean, I'm sure they would do that if asked, but they do really great. I would call more, maybe they would disagree with me, but it is very sort of, they can do candid and documentary style. And it just looks more like real life. And I just appreciate that so much in art and photography. And so if you are looking for some awesome, down-to-earth, talented people in Colorado, then I know Colorado's a big state, but I'm sure that there's some travel that people can do. If you want a good photographer, I'm going to link to them.
Awesome. All right. Well,
I think that's it. Yeah. Wow. We really just like...
That was a lot for just two questions. Yeah. But hopefully Olivia and Melissa will know that
we really love and care.
We really love and care. And anyone else who's having some of those same issues, I hope this was helpful to you too. So leave us a comment to let us know how this resonates with you. Obviously, if you have your own Dear Krachel questions, make sure you submit a form. The link is in the episode description.
You can also email us. Like, I'm not, if you're not, every single episode, you go to the episode notes, there will be a link to submit us a question for Dear Krachel. If that is too much of a bother and you just, maybe you're just living your life and you have a thought and you don't want to miss it. And so you just pull up your email. You can just write us at contact@clarityonfire.com. Just put Dear Krachel in the subject line and I will not hate you for doing it that way.
No, we'll get it to the right place.
You can Instagram message us too if you want to. @clarityonfire. Whatever you want to do, just know that I don't care and just make sure I know it's for Dear Krachel and I'll always consider answering it. It's hard to pick sometimes.
I know. It is. We get so many good ones. So sorry to people who wrote something this week or this month. We didn't get to you. We might get to you next month.
Yeah. And then
we wanted to give these the time that they deserved.
As we're wrapping up, it's been a really long time because we were promoting the people-pleasing course for so long that it's been a while since I politely asked people. I can't do polite very well, but, sort of aggressively, politely ask people to give us a rating and a review if you haven't. If you're new to the podcast, I and Kristen, our days are truly made when we see nice comments. And I even get a little bit of a boost when I just see a new rating, even if it's not a review. I mean, I do think you can take like literally 60 seconds to just write a couple sentences if you're loving it. And
we always read them out loud to each other. And
I screenshot them and I send them to my friends to be like, look, people like me. I'm having a good day.
Yeah, we love it. So if it doesn't take too much of your time, we would be very appreciative.
It's like putting a tip in our tip jar.
Exactly.
Because this is free.
But it's free.
Well, we're doing all this work for free.
But they don't even have to pay. Like a tip. It's a free comment.
Just paying with their time. Just 60 seconds.
So if you're willing, we would love it. And we will be back on Tuesday with a new blog from Rachel.
It's been so long. Let's see what I have to say now. I have no idea at this point what I'm writing about. So I'll surprise myself. All right.
See you then.
Bye.